joining us now to discuss the significance of this visit is a special guest. We have with us on Global Lens tonight Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India. Sir, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens tonight. Great to have you with us. As I mentioned, India and France are marking the 25th anniversary of their strategic partnership. This is Emmanuel Macron's third visit to India and the sixth time that a French leader will be the chief guest at India's Republic Day parade. Now, Macron is enjoying Royal Indian hospitality in Jaipur. But according to you, how significant is this visit? Is it largely ceremonial, high on symbolism, with perhaps any big-ticket announcements unlikely?
Well, of course, it is ceremonial in the sense that he's been invited as chief guest at our Republic Day tomorrow. But behind this ceremonial honor that is being done to him is a very strong strategic message that within 6 to 7 months of the Prime Minister being the chief guest on Bastille Day, July 14th in Paris last year, Macron has come to India as the chief guest on our Republic Day. This is quite unusual, even between very friendly countries, because generally you space these visits in order to get the maximum advantage out of them, because within 6 to 7 months, things can't change so much in terms of the agenda, especially as the July 14 visit came out with very substantial outcomes in many different areas. So while this will be a ceremonial visit, which sends a strategic message, this will also be an occasion to take stock of what was agreed, how far the initiatives have progressed, if there are any hurdles, to ginger up the bureaucracies to implement those initiatives quickly, and also discuss new areas of cooperation, because the international international situation is evolving. There are new challenges. After all, there are all sorts of discussions going on on the economic side in the WTO. On the political side, you have the Ukraine war, you have now the war in Gaza, and then the Houthis are just disturbing sea lanes in the Red Sea, which is a big problem for India, and India has openly expressed its concerns. Then there are these larger issues of the French position in Africa becoming more difficult. They have lost ground. And India, as a leader of the Global South and with strong links with Africa, can be indirectly helpful in terms of the French desire to have a more direct relationship with the Global South in order to maintain its own strategic autonomy, as it were. Because remember, France has always had a problem with the Anglo-Saxon world. And within Europe now, Germany has very clearly signaled a very pro-Atlantic, a pro-US tilt. So the French-German tandem that was the root of stability in the European Union has got disturbed. The Anglo-Saxon countries are trying to manage the security of Europe, in which France does not have as central a role as it would like to have as a permanent member of the Security Council, as a major nuclear power, with a very strong defense production base, with space capabilities, and a great tradition of diplomacy, and in fact, along with Germany being the progenitor of the European Union in that sense. So France thinks it has international responsibilities and wants to play a bigger role, but the Europeans want to rely on the United States of America for their security and think that these are French ambitions to play a larger-than-life role, etc., etc. So in this context, larger context of trouble in the European Union and all the conflicts that I've mentioned, and France losing ground in Africa, and then, of course, the entire Indo-Pacific area where France is a resident power. It has a large population. It has military forces stationed in this area. It is very concerned about the about China in terms of the inroads they are making in the Western Indian Ocean, where France has territories and interests, as well as in the Pacific, where France has overseas territories. So they want to preserve their influence and their equities in this area. And India is an obvious partner of choice. In the sense that India has the strongest navy in the Indian Ocean, and there can be very good collaboration between the two countries in the Indian Ocean area. And in the last July 14 meeting in Paris, it was also agreed that India will also involve itself in security matters in the Pacific. Also, this was the new Indo-Pacific vision that the two countries had agreed on. And finally, of course, there is the defense element. Now, why defense? There is sometimes a feeling that, France is very friendly towards India, etc., because it wants to sell more arms. Now, this is a very wrong way of looking at it. I mean, if India doesn't want to buy French arms, nobody can push India to buy them. But India does that because France is a reliable and trusted partner. It has never applied sanctions on India, even after our 1998 nuclear tests.
Exactly.
When President Chirac said clearly that it will be business as usual. So it is a trusted partner. And we know that we can rely on France. And today, because France does not want to lose ground in the international arms market, if you like, they are willing to transfer major technologies to India. It is for us to decide how much we want to take and how much this will interfere with our Atmanirbharta goal in defense manufacturing. Therefore, a lot of decisions we have to take insofar how far we want to go with France in terms of defense collaboration. But yes, of course, in terms of defense manufacturing in Atmanirbharta, if there is joint production, joint development, then yes, the doors are open to France, because France will gain and we will gain. So this is a very important area of our strategic cooperation, a very vital area, because India faces a lot of defense challenges. Yes. And therefore, we need these advanced technologies and also critical technologies, like we have in the United States, the ICET, where critical and emerging technologies are the area of collaboration. With France also, it has some very advanced critical technologies too. Quantum computing and what have you. And therefore, this is an area also on which there is a lot of prospect in terms of advancing our bilateral ties.
Undoubtedly. And I will dwell on the defense cooperation aspect in greater detail in just a moment. But before that, let me ask you this question. It's been widely reported that President Macron accepted India's invite for the Republic Day function at short notice after President Biden said he was unable to travel to India. Now, many commentators have said this proves the strength of the bilateral relationship, and that it also sends out the message that today India has many powerful friends. Biden is not the only one. Do you agree?
No, I think the first part of what you said is true, in the sense that it was very gracious of the French president to have accepted this invitation, knowing that he was a bit of a stand-in, since President Biden expressed his inability to accept the invitation. And mind you, France is a major international power. And within France, there are a lot of issues that President Macron is grappling with, and which requires constant attention. There are protests in France. As usual, the politics is very divided. There are these very difficult immigration issues. There have been, as you know, the Yellow Vest movement and strikes of different kind and this and that. Recently, there has been a change in prime ministers. And of course, as I said, there is this conflict in Europe and in the Middle East, and etc. So there's a lot that requires President Macron to stay put. And the program of presidents of major powers is not that flexible that they can just change their program and make themselves available easily. But nevertheless, I mean, he took this opportunity to show his own regard for India, to demonstrate the depth of the strategic ties and build on them further. And of course, he would have had in mind, and the French certainly have had this in mind, I know, that whereas Sarkozy and Hollande were chief guests at our Republic Day, and before that, President Chirac and President Giscard d'Estaing, President Macron, this is his second term now, has not been chief guest of our Republic Day, and they wanted that. And I think that wish has been fulfilled, though in circumstances which were not the most congenial in terms of decision making. But I must say he has been very gracious. But insofar as the signal that we are saying that if President Biden doesn't come, we have other friends, I don't think that it is this kind of a competition, really, because President Biden is himself involved in major political battles at home, major political issues that are confronting his administration, the Ukraine war, the manner in which he's conducting it, and of course the Middle East war is being highly contested, and there is Trump. And so there is a State of the Union address that he has to make this month or next month or whenever. So he was genuinely preoccupied. And then he's not a young man. He came for the G20 meeting and then coming again for January 26. I think, given the state of his health, would not have been that easy for him to do. So I think we would have understood why he was unable to come. But we needed a substitute. Remember when the Sultan of Oman did not come, we asked the King of Bhutan to step in. But this time, here was an opportunity to invite the French president, given the excellent personal equation between the two leaders, as you mentioned in your opening remarks. I think President Macron thought it was a good opportunity to stress the closeness of ties between the two countries, and he accepted the invitation. And I don't think we had in mind a kind of a signal to Biden that if you don't come, we have other choices, because we are attaching a great deal of importance to our ties with the United States. And in some ways, frankly, this is the most important relationship we have today.
You're right. And of course, it was very gracious of the French president to have agreed to come at short notice. Now, you know, as I mentioned, France became India's first strategic partner in the Western world. For France, India was the first non-European partner. Correct me if I'm wrong, but France was transferring defense technology to India long before the US decided to do the same in 2023. France, as you mentioned, is a country that has stood by India even after our nuclear test. When countries like the US were busy imposing sanctions on us, France opposed those sanctions. France has supported us in various international forums like the UN Security Council. Therefore, would it be correct to say that France has indeed emerged as one of the most reliable partners for India?
Yes, of course. Because with the United States, although it's the most important relationship, it comes with a lot of baggage. Because United States does not really believe in partners of equal status. I mean, you know, they dominate all the big powers in the world. I mean, the Western powers. And so therefore, the manner in which they think and conduct their foreign policy, they would want countries like India to be more than partners, to be actually allies, if not formally, but in effect. Which is why whatever we do with them comes with a lot of conditionalities and a lot of expectations on their part. Although, of course, lately they have been a little more pragmatic because India is rising and India's usefulness is recognized. The China challenge is very big. India is the only country that can stand up to China in Asia. Therefore, they have that consideration that they must build India and keep India in the larger Western bloc rather than India strengthening its ties with the blocs which are China, which are Russia and China dominated, like the SCO or BRICS or whatever. So there is and then of course, as you know, we are blasted every now and then by the US press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and what have you. They are on a rampage against India on democracy issues, human rights issues. There are human rights organizations, the U.S. U.S. What is it called? Commission on International Religious Freedoms
Right.
and Human Rights Watch and all that. They keep attacking us. In fact, there is a huge and Foreign Affairs magazine and their think tank. There's a huge disconnect between the U.S. government and how it looks at the India relationship, and how the U.S. academia, the think tanks, the press looks at India. With France, we don't have that problem.
You're right.
Yes, we do. No, we do. No, let me correct myself. The French press also is very negative. Though I was very happy that a few weeks ago, their Le Point magazine, which is a kind of India Today kind of a magazine there, it had a 78-page supplement on India. And I read through all the articles, and I think it was largely quite balanced. Of course, they cannot but talk about minority issues and human rights issues and what have you. But this was, in a sense, a minor part of a much larger positive image of India. But then, if you look at Le Monde, Libération, or France 24, their reporting on India, it remains very negative. And in fact, many of the French activists on the rights front actually condition European thinking. So there is a problem on the ground. But at the government level, there is no interference in our internal affairs. There's no Khalistani stuff that goes on, etc., etc. So it's a more comfortable relationship. It's a more equal relationship. And it's a more manageable relationship from that point of view, because France is a very important country, but it doesn't have the international clout that a country like the United States has. And therefore, I think the option that we have in the Western world of close relations with France is very vital in terms of projecting that we have an important pro-Western element in our foreign policy.
Absolutely. And you said it's a more comfortable and equal relationship. The US should really stop lecturing us about human rights, especially given the number of Palestinian civilians who've died in Gaza and the Biden administration's unstinting support to Israel's war in Gaza. But moving on, since you referred to defense cooperation being a very significant aspect of this relationship, this visit by Macron comes at a time when the Indian and French governments are negotiating multi-billion-dollar deals. India looking to procure 26 Rafale fighter jets and also 3 Scorpion-class submarines. This will be a deal worth 90,000 crores. Macron is also hoping to sell nuclear reactors to India. Now, are we likely to see rapid progress on that front in the near future, in your opinion, even if the deals are not completely sealed during this trip?
Oh, no. The negotiations are going on. Negotiations will be complex. They will be very complex. Price negotiations, the degree of technology transfer, how this will be phased out over how many years, and the price factor and everything else. But the decision has been taken, and the French are not going to lose this contract, these 2 contracts. So there are important considerations on both sides to see closure, which is favorable to both sides. But this will go on for some time. That is one aspect. Insofar as the nuclear reactors are concerned, I think the Jaipur thing and the 6 nuclear reactors that France was to build is something that will not materialize either during this visit or in the near future, because the cost factor remains a critical hurdle. And the French nuclear reactors are very expensive, and the cost of electricity that will be produced has to be competitive. And then there are those liability issues which still remain to be addressed. So those negotiations will continue. But what is of interest and which could move forward is cooperation in the small modular nuclear reactors, SMRs, which are 300 megawatts each. That holds potential. And this has been mentioned in the joint statement when Prime Minister went in July to Paris, and something will probably be mentioned during this visit. And the other area, which is not connected to defense, would be the International Solar Alliance,
Yeah.
which has been initiated by India and France together. And in this regard, I think some concrete project of cooperation in a third country is being discussed and might be announced during the visit.
All right. And you're right, Jaipur continues to be a sticking point. But you refer to China, so let's talk about that. India and France are key partners in the Indo-Pacific region, where China is perceived as a common threat or adversary. How important is the China factor in the India-French partnership of today? Does France see India as a countervailing force against China?
Yes, but France also, if you remember, President Macron, when he went to, I don't know which country in the Western Pacific. No, when he went for the G7 summit, in that interview in Tokyo, in Hiroshima, he said that he spoke up against the current US policy against China, and thought that the United States was pushing China against the wall on Taiwan. And he said that we don't want to be caught up in this rivalry and just be camp followers. We should have an independent policy on these matters. Europe must have an independent policy consistent with its own interests. Now, remember, while France is worried about China's activity and expansionism in the Western Pacific and in the Pacific Islands, where France has territories, as well as the Western Indian Ocean, where France has major equities, La Réunion, Mayotte, and all that. There is a community of interest between India and France in meeting the China challenge and keeping a tab on the Chinese penetration in this area, in the maritime and political domain. But the big difference is that there is no direct security threat to France from China territorially, like we have, where Chinese are positioned on the border, they claim our territory. We have 50,000 troops on both sides facing each other. There is no sign of de-escalation. And we've had clashes between the two countries. France has a lot of trade and investment interests in China. After all, China is the second largest economy, the biggest exporter in the world, and Europe needs China. So there always will be a difference in approach at one level in terms of French and Indian attitudes to China. But another level, there are good grounds for cooperation because both perceive China as a threat. And Europe is, as you know, becoming very conscious of China's systemic challenge, as they say, to Europe. They've been trying to divide Europe by this 18+1 forum that they had created with existing EU members and some countries in the Balkans and all that, to have a separate kind of a dialogue with China, things like that. So I think we must be realistic that we have a lot of common ground in terms of facing the China challenge, but it is not as if our views are identical in terms of how this challenge should be addressed.
All right. Final question, sir, before we let you go. In 2023, Prime Minister Modi and President Macron met about a dozen times at various multilateral forums, including, of course, the Prime Minister's visit to France. Does this visit by Macron also underline the deep and personal friendship that has evolved between the two leaders over the years? Has their personal chemistry, the camaraderie that we see, now become a significant component of the Indo-French strategic partnership?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And I say this with inside knowledge, because I have had occasion to meet President Macron or interact with him in some context. I was there when Prime Minister visited France on July 14. I was there at the banquet also. I know for a fact that President Macron has a high regard personally for Prime Minister Modi. They talk to each other a great deal. They relate to each other very well. And France attaches importance to Prime Minister Modi's thinking and views and the manner in which he tries to address global issues. And there are a lot of reasons for them to have a dialogue with each other, especially about Ukraine and Russia and how the Middle East, what have you, because France, like us, would want stability, more stability in the larger European and Middle East and Indo-Pacific region. But coming back to your specific question, yes, there is very good personal chemistry between the two leaders, and Prime Minister is good at that in terms of developing personal rapport. He has a knack of doing it.
Most certainly. On that note, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, thank you so much for speaking to us on Global Lens tonight.